Okay. I think we'll go ahead and start. And we have agreed that we're going to start today with some announcements that I'm going to make, and Rachel's going to help me. So a couple of things we want to talk about. We've had a lot of groups ask us for pros and cons, and we have limited capabilities this year for a wide variety of reasons. So what we've decided to do is we're going to do one pro and con and invite as many people as we can. We can have as many as 100 people, and we could have that many for our first pro and con. We will advertise it widely. It will be on October 6th at 2 p.m. That's a Sunday. We will video it much the same way we're videoing our presentation today. Our videos that we have made are on our YouTube channel, so you can search YouTube for us, and they're also on our web page. You can find us on the internet, our web page. But we were also talking about making sure that you know about all the different things that you can do to help get out the vote. We've had lots of people ask us about that. I want to make a shout out to Jerry Classic, who has been doing a postcard activity for us, where we have partnered with the North Carolina League of Women Voters, who sent us postcards, and we are finishing the preparation of those postcards so we can send them back to them so they can mail them out. They need a lot of extra help because they also are in court over voting rights issues in their state. Remind me, Rachel, or say a couple of those things you were talking about in the beginning.
We wanted to talk about registering as a poll worker and registering to track your ballot.
There's a website called, I think it's called Track My Vote, that you can go to and sign up for, and they will notify you when the ballots are mailed to you, and then when they receive it back from you, so that you can make sure that your ballot is tracked, and you know where it is most of the time. And the links to those things are on our opening page of our webpage also, as well as Vote California and Vote 411 and a couple of other organizations that are giving people ideas about how to make sure that they voted in the last election and can vote in the next election, etc. Our last webinar that we put on our YouTube account and on our Facebook page, I think there's a link on our Facebook page to it, and on our web page, was by a representative of the LA County Registrar of Voters, and he did an excellent job. And if you have not seen that webinar, I suggest you go ahead and look at that video, because there's a lot of information about voting, about vote centers, how that's all going to work, and how all the variety of ways that you can turn your own votes in. Is that it, Rachel, or was there something else?
Well, one thing that we're highly recommending is that anybody that is capable and feels safe registering to be a poll worker, register to be a poll worker. And if you yourself do not feel so that you can do that, perhaps you know somebody in your sphere that can. So a lot of college students are home doing distance learning, and that might be something available to them. Or if you are 16 and older and have a GPA of 3.5 and above and parental permission, you can also be a poll worker. So I think many of us know that traditionally poll workers tend to be seniors, and we want to keep our seniors at home and safe. So if we take the burden off of them, then we can make sure that there's plenty of people to be working our polls. You can do that by going to your county registrar's site or by going to the Secretary of State. So I know I myself have registered through LA County, but you can also go through the state and then they will punch you in wherever poll workers are needed. Especially as more and more people are getting very weary of putting their ballots in the mail. I think as much as they might be worried about going to the polls, we still need poll workers.
Okay, I've just been notified that October 6th is not a Sunday. And I know we scheduled this for the first Sunday in October, so it must be October 3rd. So if you heard me before say October 6th, I think that was an error. It's the 4th. It's October 4th. Yeah. I was close. Sorry. But Karen Rosenthal told me about that, so thank you, Karen. Okay, it is now with a great deal of pleasure that I introduce to you Helen Hutchinson, who is a longtime League member. She is the past president of the California State League of Women Voters. She began her career in the League of Women Voters here in our Claremont area group. And I'll let her tell you more about herself now. Take it away, Helen.
Thanks so much. I'm going to share my screen and get started here. So I really am happy to be here. This is really, I call it my mother league because it was the league that I started in, but also the league where my mother was a member for many years. And I'm going to do a basic presentation about Proposition 15, kind of a summary of the measure, with a little bit of history and then an update about the campaign and have a time for questions. I will send a copy of these slides either later today or tomorrow to Barbara, along with a series of handouts, so you don't need to write everything down. Most of us want the similar things. We want good schools for our kids. We want healthy families and safe neighborhoods. But for more than 4 decades, big corporations have not been paying their fair share. They've been leaving the funding for California's schools and community services falling behind. California now has the most overcrowded classrooms in the United States and some of the worst ratios of counselors, librarians, and nurses per student. So Proposition 15 is on the November ballot. It's schools and communities first. A lot of us already were part of the group that gathered signatures for this measure. It will ensure that our schools and communities come first and that they will have the resources they need to educate all of our kids and the services to provide support for all of our families. We have roads that are crumbling, libraries that are closing, healthcare systems that are really challenged to the breaking point. I think we've all seen that recently. By simply requiring all commercial property owners to pay their fair share, Schools and Communities First, Prop 15, is going to raise $12 billion every year for schools and local communities in California. It changes the commercial property tax rules under Prop 13. But only the commercial property tax rules. So a little bit of background here. Property taxes are set at roughly 1% of the on-paper assessed value. That's the sticker price, but it's a sticker price at the last time it was sold or transferred. Those taxes are frozen until the property is next sold or upgraded, then it is not reassessed. And that's true for both residential and commercial property. So big corporations are able to hide changes in ownership and then can go for decades without being reassessed. That's resulted in a larger and larger gap between what the valuable commercial properties would be paying at fair market value and what's actually being paid. This has resulted in a direct revenue loss to local governments and public education, both of which are highly dependent on local property taxes. We've seen this over the last 40+ years without a change, and it's only going to get worse. Another problematic result of this is that 2 identically valuable commercial properties are likely not paying identical property taxes. So we have an anti-competitive real estate market that rewards commercial property owners who don't grow or upgrade, compared to newer owners or those who do upgrade. For example, 2 properties could have the market value of about $5 million, and that would, but it would not be reflected on the assessor rolls. One owner could be paying $10 per square foot, and the other $35 per square foot, excuse me, simply because the first owner hasn't changed, or it hasn't made improvements, or has hidden changes in ownership. So Prop 15 is a solution that would create a split roll, and I think we've all seen that in the news, calling this the split roll property tax system. And it would be for some commercial properties. It's what most other states do. So the split roll, we'd have one roll would be commercial and industrial properties that are valued over $3 million. Roll 2 would be everything else. That's residential property, agricultural property, commercial industrial property that's valued at less than $3 million. And for roll 1, the commercial and industrial property valued over $3 million, those properties and only those properties would be reassessed every 3 years. It would not require a change in ownership to trigger a reassessment. That makes sure that identically valued commercial properties are simply paying the identical property taxes, and it untethers the property taxes from ownership. We make sure that those big corporations are paying the current market value property taxes. It does not change the tax rate. The rate is still going to be at 1%, which means that even after Prop 15 passes, we'll still have some of the lowest property rates in the country. So what it's saying is, let's just take a look every few years to see what large commercial properties are actually worth and have them pay the same tax rate as everybody else. So a little step back here. How do we get here? One of the drivers of California's inequality right now is Prop 13, which passed in 1978. Property values were soaring and resulted in rising property taxes. I think a bunch of us can remember that. So Prop 13 created this current system, and it helped homeowners stay in their homes, but the biggest winners were large commercial property owners. The result of Prop 13 was and still is major disinvestment in our public schools and local services, and has affected every level of government. Property taxes fund our schools, our cities, our counties, and our special districts. In the 40+ years since Prop 13 passed, we in California dropped from 7th in per pupil funding to 41st, and we're continuing to fall. Some of the immediate tax breaks that happened after the passage of Prop 13 in 1978 were the Bank of America that got a $7 million per year windfall. Shell Oil got a $16 million per year windfall. Standard Oil, which is now Chevron, got $47 million every year. The final statistic I'm going to put out there is that on average, residential property turns over every 10 years. So that means that we have had increased property taxes on that residential property. Commercial property turns over far less frequently. And then those big ones, they're able to hide when they change it so that they really have stagnant property valuation on the assessor's rolls. To understand the scale of the problem, it's helpful to understand how much the unequal treatment of commercial property tax is actually costing our schools and local government. We have some examples of reclaimed revenue by region. When I looked today, the current estimate is that Los Angeles County, countywide, which includes all the cities, will get $4 billion every year. That will be split between the county and the cities and the school districts. The Inland Empire, San Bernardino and Riverside counties, will get just under $1 billion a year. 92% of the revenue comes from just 10% of all commercial properties. So it is, as with a lot of tax rates, a few properties account for the bulk of the money coming in. Prop 15 will reclaim $12 billion every year for schools, community colleges, and local communities. The revenue will flow this way. Property taxes are collected by the county. We pay our property tax bills every year to our county assessor. And then the revenue is divided among various agencies. And the statewide average is that it's roughly 40-60, with 40% of the money going to public education and 60% going to local governments. The public school money, the education money, is going to be sent to a dedicated education fund. That's basically like a bank account that nobody, including the legislature, can change. That's pooled from all over the counties around the state, and then it's distributed, and it will be using the LCFF, the local control funding formula, which is the math equation that allocates public education revenue to school districts, and it's based on need. So school districts that have more high need students get more money per student. It's a standard that for most education funding in California right now. Local districts then get to decide how to spend their money. And that is through the LCAP process, the 3-year planning process that involves school boards, administrators, teachers, school workers, parents, students, community groups, and making decisions together how to best allocate those resources to meet the needs of their students locally. Every school district in the state will receive more money, and the funding can be used for whatever is needed locally, and it will be decided how it is spent locally. So of the 40% that goes to education, just under 90% of that 40%, so the bulk of it will go to K-12 schools. And then the rest of that will go to community colleges. And I think that we all know about our community colleges and the struggle, but they are, everybody in the state lives near a community college. It is the largest higher education system in the world. It has more than 3 million students. We have 70% of nurses in California attended a community college. The Prop 15 funding could be used for increasing classes and program offerings. It's having more job and technical training if that's what the community locally wants. The local funding will stay within the county and then gets divided between the county, the city, and special districts. And those can be library districts or water districts or parks and rec districts. They're different around the state. That division is different based on what goes on in your county, and but they will divide that money the same way they divide property taxes now. Just like with the schools, that is unrestricted money that's going into the general fund of each of those agencies, and then local governments can decide how to spend that money, which means we as local activists need to be right there making sure that it is spent in the way that we think it should be. But it can go to things like libraries and parks and firefighters and first responders, senior services, county public and mental health, housing and homeless services, public transportation, and my favorite, and I think everybody's favorite right now, are county elections offices. All that money is going to have to be accounted for and publicly disclosed. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So we're going to get $12 billion a year approximately in the state. It's collected by reassessing large commercial properties throughout the state. The revenue is divided between public education and local governments. The education funding is going to be redistributed around the state using an equity formula. The local government money stays within the county, and then decisions are going to be made about how to spend that at the local level. Prop 15 will protect the current Prop 13 homeowner and renter protection. So those protections stay in place. Remember, we talked about the split roll. We're only talking about the large commercial properties. Residential property is defined as the property is used. It is, so if somebody lives there, it's exempt. Zoning is not what's important, and ownership is not important. If a residential property is owned by a single person or by a corporation, it doesn't matter, it's exempt, that's it. All residential property is exempt, and that's the nature of the split roll. Prop 15 also protects agricultural land. The opposition to this measure is spreading lies about this, spreading lies about a lot of things, but right now we're hearing a lot about the agricultural property. And I want to make it clear that throughout this measure, both in the intent and in the actual language, agricultural and commercial agricultural property is exempt, meaning it will continue to be assessed the way it is now and will not change. The language is broad and explicit and ensures that agriculture will not be impacted. It also exempts all land that's designated for open space or conservation uses. Prop 15 provides all businesses with some new tax relief and invests in the communities around them. It exempts the vast majority of commercial properties, in terms of the number of properties, so we can invest in those small businesses. There is a tax cut for all businesses, and that is in their fixtures and equipment. So under current law, businesses pay a property tax on the things that they own, like equipment, supplies, machinery, desks, computers, all that stuff. Under Prop 15, the first $500,000, so $500,000 in fixtures and equipment are exempt for all businesses. So that means almost all businesses will be exempt from this tax, and small businesses in particular. That reduces their tax obligation and encourages business investment. The opposition likes to talk about rents and how rents are going to go up. I want to make really clear that rents are determined by market supply and not property values. If property taxes determined our rents, then we should have some of the lowest rents in the country because we have some of the lowest property taxes in the country. We know that isn't true. Supply is what determines the rent and not the property taxes. So this is going to also, for small businesses, one more thing is that it will level the playing field. Small businesses are almost all paying more than their fair share. They're commonly in commercial spaces that are paying at or near current market property taxes, but they're competing against companies who are actively avoiding reassessment and get to pocket that extra profit for no reason other than the fact that they've been in one place longer. So that makes that anti-competitive. The current marketplace is anti-competitive. Moving on, Prop 15 gives local control to all of this extra revenue because we know the issues need to be addressed locally and how urgent they are. Communities need to make plans to address their local needs, communities need to be able to plan to address local needs, and they need stability in their revenue. Property taxes are a stable source of revenue, unlike the state budget, which swings back and forth with the stock market. Priorities vary from community to community. I'm now in Alameda County, and what we may need in Oakland may be very different than what's happening in Los Angeles County and particularly there in Claremont. Prop 15 provides stable sources of revenue and empowers the local community to make the decisions on how to spend the money. And finally, it ensures strict accountability and transparency. There are accountability and transparency requirements built into the measure, making sure that the education money is going to go to classrooms and that the local money, we get to see where it is actually going to be spent. Finally, this is about the coalition. We have a broad coalition of groups, and it's really about the people. Our motives are rooted firmly in fixing a problem that's been over 40 years in the making. We've done so in a practical manner that doesn't see the needs of our economy and morality as mutually exclusive. We see them both being met by our measure here. The coalition is comprised of advocates on behalf of seniors, educators, faith and community groups, small business owners, students, janitors, doctors, nurses, and first responders. We have housing advocates, environmentalists, municipal workers, and people of every color and creed. And the measure is fully qualified. It is on the November ballot. I was asked to address why we had to, once the original measure, original schools and communities first measure was qualified, why we went and got signatures a second time. We had originally been aiming at the election 2 years ago, the November 2018. And we didn't quite make that. So we qualified for this election very early, which allowed us to have a full year of time that we spent talking to supporters, talking to opponents, talking to community groups. And it became clear that there were some tweaks that we could make to the measure that would make it even stronger than it was. And even better, and we wanted to go with the absolute strongest measure we could. So we went out and we gathered signatures a second time, and I thank you all for your work on that. The campaign update, you know, we had originally hoped to be deep into an education campaign where we were out talking to people, knocking on doors, doing outreach to various communities. Our circumstances have changed for all of us. So the campaign has changed to a more electronic kind of a campaign. We're still focusing on impacted communities and underrepresented voters. So that is a hard sell, but we have groups in our coalition that are doing great outreach and getting really great results. We've started doing phone banking, text banking, and we have a new tool for outreach so that we can each reach out to our own circle of friends through email or text messaging. We're going to start up a letter writing campaign. And finally, we're asking people to do personal outreach. Ensure that your own circle of acquaintances know about the measure, why you're supporting it, and why it's important for all of us to support it. And as you talk to people, I'm going to note that we see that there are three groups of voters. There are those who are diehard supporters, people like me. You don't need to convince me to support this measure. So you don't need to spend your time talking to me. There are some diehard opponents, and I think we all can name some of them. It's really not worth it to spend your time and energy talking to them either. If you find one of them, you can just save your breath. But there's those that are left in the middle. They're people who can be persuaded, or they simply just don't know enough about it. And we're calling them squishy voters. And we ask that you focus on them. They may simply not know a lot, but they could be concerned by the scare tactics of some of our opponents. So whatever it is, please do your best to help spread the word. And now I'm going to change to questions, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see people and put your questions in.
Rachel, I'm going to let you ask the first question.
All right. Thank you so much, Helen. That was super informative. Our first question is, who will decide how to divide up the money for community colleges? And I think this might go a little bit broader. Will it be kept from the state supplanting it? Will the local community colleges decide how to spend the individual college's share of the money? And this comes from Sue Keith, who has been on the Citrus College board.
Yeah. So hi, Sue. It's good to hear from you. So the money is definitely kept from the state supplanting it. This money is definitely written in to be extra money and over and above any other money they receive from the state. So then that's written fully into the measure. And I have to say that I'm thinking about the community college money. I believe the money, it will go to each community college, and then the community colleges can decide. But I am going to need to write myself a note and get back to you exactly about that. I know the school money, the K-12 money, goes to the school district, and that money gets divided up. And I'm assuming the community college will go the same to each community college district. But assuming is not knowing. So I'm going to check about that. And I will send a note.
I'm going to say, if you have a question, please go to the Q&A box and type your question in, and Rachel or I will ask Helen. Here's the next question. How does the law protect from property owners circumventing by having someone live on property or planting a garden, small business selling produce, or similar to qualify for residential and agricultural exemptions?
So that was some of the changes we made were tightening up what residential property is. It needs to be at least 45% of the property is residential, and otherwise it would qualify as a mixed use, and the commercial part would be taxed as commercial property, and only the residential property would be exempt. And it does include those small, I live in Oakland, so we have a lot of little infield gardens where people are raising crops. It's empty property. That will not, that counts as agricultural property. So.
All right, thank you. The next question is, how do you expect to overcome the Jarvis tax group with their big money and misinformation tactics that they've been using in the newspaper for the last year?
So we know we're going to be outspent. We have the money to run a credible campaign, and I will thank a number of other organizations. The League is not a group that brings money to the table, but we do bring our name and we do bring our volunteers. So we have enough money to run a credible campaign. We will be outspent, but we have truth and justice on our side. And our polling is actually quite strong right now. We are doing very well in our polling. So we are confident we're going to win. I will tell you that as part of this coalition, we've been part of the coalition now for over 8 years. And we figured, what I like to say is we get one shot at this. We're only going to get one try, and then it's going to have to go back for another generation. And so we are really confident that we can win this. We have because of the groups that we have who are the boots on the ground, that include the League. I mean, I'm counting on League volunteers to be out helping spread the word, but the groups that are helping turn out the unlikely voters, and they are getting great responses from their communities. People really understand that this is important to everybody in the state, and we are going to have a great voter turnout, and the message is getting out there.
The next question is, if a residential house is a rental and valued under $3 million, is this property exempt from the increase?
So if it's residential, it is exempt from reassessment. It doesn't matter who owns it. If somebody lives there, it's residential property and it will not be reassessed. So we include trailer parks, we include apartment buildings, nursing homes, all of those count as residential property and will not be reassessed.
Thank you. Next, how will reassessments be done and by whom?
So property reassessments will be done by our county assessors, which means our county assessors are going to need to have increased staff, and we know that. Built into the measure is a kind of a ramp-up period, and the assessors will work with the state legislature and the Board of Equalization to figure out how that is actually going to work, but there will be a ramp-up period where they are hiring new staff and training new staff and then getting them on board. So this is not going to be an immediate, we pass the measure and then we get the $12 billion. It's going to take a couple of years before we are there.
Will this require a supermajority?
No, this is a state measure. State measures all pass by simple majorities. It's only local measures that require extra supermajorities. State measures all, no matter what they are, only require a simple majority. So, but we think we're going to really smash it.
Well, I hope so too. That covered the next question, which was, does this need only a majority to pass? So we'll go on to the next. Senior retirement communities in like Hillcrest and Laverne and Claremont Manor are both not-for-profit and for-profit. Are they excluded?
They're excluded because people live there. So they are residential property. It also helps that they're nonprofits, but even if they're a for-profit, even if it's a large commercial owner of a large apartment complex, that is exempt because it's a residential property. People live there.
At this point, we don't have any more questions. We did have one participant with their hand up. And I just want to ask if that participant wants to ask their question verbally. I want to remind you that we are videotaping this, and so we may or may not be able to keep your name private. Is that what you would like? I'm going to allow you to talk if you want to. You may have to turn on your own.
Yep, just unmute herself.
You have to unmute yourself, Barbara. I can't unmute you. You have to unmute yourself. Sometimes people have difficulty finding the, it's a little microphone looking thing, usually in the bottom of your screen, and it's red with a line through it. You just click on that and it should unmute you.
No.
You could also type your question into the Q&A box.
If I may, while we're waiting to see if Barbara Armstrong can get that figured out, one thing that I keep hearing over and over from people that are against this is this slippery slope. They're saying that this is the first step, and then we're coming for, you know, you and your babies.
So that is, I mean, that is part of the lies and scare tactics
Yes.
that the opposition used. And I'm going to answer it, and then I have something else to say about this too. But the answer is it can't happen without voting on it again. Prop 13 was an initiative, it was passed, so you can't, it takes another vote. And it's, you know, that wouldn't pass. It's simple that wouldn't pass. The second thing is I'll point out that for anybody who are real policy wonks and follow the ins and outs of ballot arguments and putting in the ballot arguments, the opposition tried to challenge the Prop 15, the yes on Prop 15 ballot arguments. We had to remove one word. We had to remove the word all in one case. The opposition, we challenged because they had blatant lies in their ballot arguments, really out and out blatant lies. They had to remove more than 2 paragraphs of information from their ballot arguments. So they are using blatant lies and scare tactics. I have found it pretty effective to just call it out by saying, that's a lie, they're trying to scare you into voting no, and it's just a lie. That works pretty well.
So in the Q&A, people are saying that, and they're trying to help Barbara, I think, that they have no microphone on their screen, but I have set her screen to be unmuted. So this could be my lack of understanding of the program. If it is, I certainly apologize. Rachel, do you want to look around at that a little bit and see if you can figure that out?
Well, I think it's going to be just a little tricky thing, but Barbara, if you want to just go ahead, you can contact us later and we'll make sure Helen gets your question and gets back to you. Okay, so you can contact Barbara Nickel.
Okay, that's fine. I did not.
Wait, you're talking, so ask your question.
I had not intended to ask a question, and I don't know how my name got up there. I had just turned you on, and I had not touched my phone for the last 20 minutes. So you've done a very good job. I didn't have any questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh my gosh, sorry.
That's okay. All right, well, we do have another question. And that next question is, are there other states that have split roll taxes, and how is that system working?
So almost every other state has some kind of a split roll. I think there is one state, and it's Oregon or Washington, that doesn't. And other than that, every other state does. And it works quite well. We have had assessors in California who kind of cry that, oh, it's going to be too hard to do. It's going to be too much work. And I figure if, 48 other states in the country can do it, California can do it too. We're not that far behind people.
Our county is concerned that they won't have the resources to hire assessors. Can you address this?
The measure actually, one of the changes we made in the second filing was to increase the money and increase the stipulations about a budget for the assessors, and there is a set aside in the measure that makes sure the assessors get more money to support the staff that they are going to have to hire. And then there's also a specific time the legislature has to allocate some money for the startup costs. So the money will be there, and it was negotiated with the assessors organization. They still are not, individual assessors are still pretty, I feel like it's almost like they're whining about it, that it's going to be too much work. They can do it.
Our next is, does the League of Women Voters have yard signs, lawn signs?
I've been pushing the campaign to make lawn signs, and we haven't heard yet whether we're going to have them. So not yet. I'd like to have them, but we don't have them yet.
We have one other comment, and that was, I think you can press and hold the space bar while talking. I don't know about that. I think I don't know about that. I don't see any other questions. Do you, Rachel?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I really, Helen, want to thank you for this webinar today. It helps us to have more, it'll help us when we do our pros and cons, and we're more neutral when we do it. To have this extra background, because people will ask all of these questions. Even when we're trying to be neutral, they will ask all of these same questions. So this has been very helpful for all of us. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, it's my pleasure. This is my favorite topic this election cycle, and I'm really looking forward to being able to have a real victory when we pass this measure.
We had one more question pop up in the chat that I will pass along. Will small businesses that rent from larger property owners pass the increase along to their customers?
So the answer is that they could, but I will point out that prices are set by the market. They're not set by the property taxes that you pay or the rent that you pay. If I go into a Target or a Walgreens or a CVS in downtown San Francisco, the prices are exactly the same as they are in Lodi and Stockton and elsewhere, where rents are clearly lower than they are in downtown San Francisco. And so prices are set by the market. They are not set by the rent or by the property taxes.
Thank you. I have one other thing I want to say. One of the reasons our board wanted to use the webinar feature as opposed to a regular Zoom is so that we could maintain the anonymity of our audience. And we have done that mostly today, but a few of you who are here with us today, we have spoken your names. And so, well, I think I started it, Rachel. So if you object to have your name on this video, please email me, and we'll see what we can do about that. Thank you. I think we're ready to say goodbye. Yes?
I'll say goodbye, and it's good to see you all, even if it's virtually, and I hope that soon I'll get to come to Claremont and visit everybody. So
We look forward to seeing you.
good. Thank you all.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.